Morakoze, thank you so much, Rwanda, for hosting us. I also wish to thank IFSW Africa region for organizing this great conference and for inviting me to speak about Ubuntu and its role in sustainable development. My name is Rugare Mugumbate, and I am from Zimbabwe. I am going to talk about Ubuntu as Africa's overarching philosophy. I'll talk about philosophers, theorists, Pan-Africanists, Ubuntu in social work, warfare, and development, before presenting an integrated or holistic model of Ubuntu. I'll end this discussion by providing a critical analysis of the SDGs using Ubuntu as an analytical framework. As you all know, a good story begins with a small story. So here is the small story. In 2013, I published a paper in the African Journal of Social Work with the late Professor Andrew Chad Nyanguru. May his soul rest in peace. 4 years later, I published my thesis, the outcome of my PhD. The thesis has been downloaded 400 times in the last 5 years. In the same period, in the last 5 years, the article that I published with Professor Nyanguru has been downloaded 30 times more. That's 15,000 times. That's in the last 5 years. And that's a great difference. Because of Article A, I've been invited to speak at conferences, numerous conferences, attend media interviews, write book chapters. Why is there this great difference? I will return to this story at the end of my presentation. There's no doubt that Ubuntu is Africa's overarching philosophy. It is our mega philosophy. It is the father of our philosophies. So much has been written about Ubuntu. Others have scratched the surface, not providing adequate details about how Ubuntu could be used in social work, in social warfare, or even in development. In most African communities or countries, descriptions of being human are similar, or they are very close. You are probably thinking about what you call being human in your own community. This map shows what different communities in Africa refer to being human. The likelihood that Ubuntu is there in those communities with question marks is very high, especially among the Nubians in Egypt and other Black communities in North Africa. And in areas with communities with green question marks, my view is that Ubuntu is there. What we don't know is what it is called, but hopefully we will know very soon. This is work in progress. If anybody wants to share with me what they call being human, what they call Ubuntu in their community, please feel free to contact me. Thank you. There are often questions about where did Ubuntu originate? Where did it start? When? There are answers in the literature. There are answers in linguistics. There are also answers in history. And as social workers, we could use those answers to enhance our understanding of Ubuntu as well. So history research tells us that Ubuntu originated in West Central Africa some 4,000 years ago. That's 4,000 years BP, which means before present time. It is known through different researches that most Bantu people were staying in that region during that time. So that's about 4 millennia ago. They then moved in different directions as a result of several factors, including desertification, but also encroachment of their land by other tribes from outside Africa. When they moved with their languages, they moved with their cultures, they moved with their shared values, including Ubuntu. It is also known that 2,500 years before present time, there was a great habitation of Bantu people in the Great Lakes region. In my community, we call this area Guruswa. People stayed there for several years, and the values that they exercised during that period were guided by Ubuntu. They then moved in different directions, others east, others south, and hence Ubuntu values were shared and spread in the process. It is wrong to say this philosophy originated from South Africa or Southern Africa. It is shared by Black communities in Africa. Of course, we know that to the international community, to the global community, it was popularized by South Africans. But it doesn't mean that it originated there. They are shared values, they are shared aspects of Ubuntu. The most important ones for me are relations, culture, indigeneity, being holistic, justice and freedom, responsibility, communality, and respect. These are important aspects of Ubuntu. So I've already addressed the question of when Ubuntu originated. There are also several definitions of Ubuntu. Most of them are short. They just talk about one aspect of Ubuntu. For example, others have defined Ubuntu as I am because we are. But this is just one maxim. This is just one statement. This is just one value about Ubuntu. There are several other ones. So I would want to refer you to the definition in the African Journal of Social Work, which ends by saying an authentic individual human being is part of a larger and more significant relational, communal, societal, environmental, and spiritual world. So that's the African Journal of Social Work. It doesn't end there. The one maxim that is popular is umundu ngumundu ngabantu. But that's not the only maxim. That's not the only statement. Others call them proverbs. That's not the only one about Ubuntu. You should be thinking about other statements or maxims in your own language. In my language, ndiri nekuti tiri, it represents collectivity. But there are many other statements about Ubuntu. Moto ke moto kaboto in Botswana, it represents collectivity as well. And in Kenya, ndi ni tondu wanyu, it also represents collectivity. So there are many other maxims, there are many other statements. It would be important if we keep collecting these and using them in our social work. Besides the maxims, there are also Ubuntu values. Each community has got a different language for the different values that they have about Ubuntu. But when you look at them so closely, they relate to the 8 aspects that I've already talked about. I like the value of Sankofa among the Akani people of Ghana, which says that for you to understand the future. For you to do well in the future, you need to look back. So that's Sangofa. It's very important. There are many other values, including Shosholoza, which is about resilience, Ubunya Rwanda, which is about nationhood, Ujama, very popular. This is about familyhood or communityhood, and Umuri, which is also about familyhood and blood relations. So these are all different values of Ubuntu, and they existed between the values that were presented in social work, counseling, and other disciplines by BSTEC in 1961. So these were already there before BSTEC's principles. So there is no reason why we don't use our own principles or values in social work. Besides the maxims, the principles, there are also ethics. And there are also many. I'll just highlight one or two. Again, they talk about collectivity, for example, Ujima, creativity, for example, Kuumba, freedom and independence, for example, Uhuru, sustainability, for example, Umachobane. So there are many, and they are quite useful in the social work that we do on a day-to-day basis. Let me now turn to Ubuntu philosophers and theorists, and I'll try to run through these because I don't have enough time to talk about everything that I prepared for this conference. I only have got 30 minutes, so I'll try to be quick. I'll provide details at the end for those who would want to get these slides. I'll provide the details at the end. So let me turn to Ubuntu philosophers and theorists. And of course, the first one is none other than John Mbiti, Kenyan, who theorized on Ubuntu theology after studying several tribes in Africa, including the Shona, the Ndebele, the Tswana. He concluded that Africa is a theology of its own. Africa is a religion of its own. Africa has its own religious beliefs, and that religions from outside, Christianity, Islam, Judaism, and Buddhism, were competing with African religion, and they wanted to ensure that African religions do not exist. They labeled them primitive, demonic, evil, and they labeled us Africans as savages. So this was all to ensure that our religions eradicated. We do not practice our religions, and we do not prioritize our religions. Of course, Mbiti is known for have come up with the phrase, I am because we are, and since we are, therefore I am. That was Mbiti in 1969. So these are the several tribes or communities that Mbiti studied, and after studying these religions, he concluded that Africa is its own religion, a religion white people did not want to exist in favor of Christianity or Islam. So there are several tribes that he studied: the Malagasy, the Nyanja, the Tumbuka, the Tswana, the Bemba, the Lunda, the Baluba, the Gogo, the Tukana, the Swahili, several tribes that he studied and came up with ideas. So his philosophy, it supports Ubuntu very well, and it's grounded in research. I'll move on to Ngugi wa Thiong'o, another Kenyan who theorized on Ubuntu. And his major theory is called Decolonizing the Mind, and this was published in 1986. So is the father of the theory of decolonizing the mind. The center of his thesis was that African languages, they contain Ubuntu. Ubuntu exists, it's carried in African languages. And if we do not use African languages in favor of English, French, Portuguese, and Arabic, what we are doing is we are taking away those values of Ubuntu that are crucial to our existence. We are taking away those values of Ubuntu that are crucial to us as a people. And those languages that we are bringing into ourselves, they carry values of their people. So he called this linguicide, or the genocide of African languages, or the genocide of African values through using foreign languages. So that was the work of Ngugi wa Thiong'o, who theorized on language. Another important theorist is Stanley Samukange, who in 1980 theorized on two important aspects. The first one being the role of education in promoting African philosophies. He said, and I quote, "Whose fault is it if no one knows about the philosophy of your grandfather and mine? Is it not your fault and mine? We are the intellectuals of Africa. It is our business to distill this philosophy and send it out for the world to see." For this, he was talking about Ubuntu in the first book ever published on Ubuntu that was published in 1980. The second aspect of his thesis was on Ubuntu as a political philosophy. So he said leaders in Africa, African leaders at any level, they are leaders because of the people. Therefore, they should use that as a value, valuing people-centric leadership. So those are the two aspects of Samukange's theory of Ubuntu. Another important theorist is Lovemore Mbigi, Zimbabwean, and is special about this discussion because Mbigi is a social worker. So Mbigi's theory has got several aspects, but one important aspect is collectivity, chara chimwe achitswanye inda, but also Ubuntu inspired business culture in marketing, leadership, accountability, training, and production. So that was BT. Instead of using Western and foreign management theories, those of Mintzberg and others, we have got a philosophy of management of our own, and it's called Ubuntu management. Let me turn to the work that is often undervalued. This is the work of KK, Kenneth Buchisie Kaunda of Zambia. Dr. Kaunda died this year, may his soul rest in peace, early this year. He theorized on Ubuntu or African humanism in the 60s. And there are several aspects to his theory. There is African spirituality. There is a need for an authentic African identity. There is need for appreciation of African values. There's also a need of doing away with colonial mentality or breaking with the colonial past. So that's what KK contributed to the philosophy of Ubuntu. I will now turn on, but briefly, to the Pan-Africanists who contributed to Ubuntu. They are many, but I'll start with those who are usually undervalued. And these are three great women who contributed to decolonization in Africa. To them, Ubuntu, to be human, is to be free. So you can't be free. You can't be a person. You can't be human if you don't have freedom. So Ubuntu to them meant freedom. Mbande Nzinga was the first one in Angola, now Angola. That was in 1624 when Mbande Nzinga became a queen in Angola. He became a queen because his brother committed suicide, faced with numerous requests for slaves by the Portuguese. The king committed suicide and the sister became the queen. She did very well with the government, appointing women to important positions of authority in the country and community. That was powerful, and that was several years ago. But for Mbande Nzinga, fighting colonialism meant fighting for freedom. For Mbande Nzinga, Ubuntu meant freedom. There was no, you can't be human without being free. Mbuyane is the second one, who in 1998 was executed by the colonists led by Cecil John Rhodes. Why? Because she was fighting occupation. She was fighting colonial occupation. And what did she say? Mafupa angu achamuka, meaning that my people will liberate themselves. Decolonization will happen. So that was Mbuya Nyanda. For Mbuya Nyanda, to be human meant to be free. Ubuntu meant freedom. The last a person I will talk about here, again, a woman was Ya Asandewa, regarded as the queen mother of the Ejesu in Ghana. So when the Ashanti kingdom was being colonized, she said, if you, the men of Ashanti, will not go forward, then we will. We, the women, will. I shall call upon my fellow women who will fight the white men, who will fight till the last of us falls in the battlefields. For Ya Asantewa, to be human meant to be free. Ubuntu meant freedom. Please take time to think about Pan-Africanists, other women and men in different regions of Africa who contributed to decolonization of the continent. There are many other Pan-Africanists who contributed to Ubuntu, including Kwame Nkrumah, the father of neo-colonialism, including Jomo Kenyatta of Kenya, who talked about Harambee, including Julius Nyerere of Tanzania, who talked about Ujamaa, and Desmond Tutu of South Africa, who talked about reconciliation, as well as Nelson Mandela. They're also emerging and new Pan-Africanists. Please also take a moment to think about who are the emerging, who are the new Pan-Africanists who take this work forward. I will now move on to talk about application of Ubuntu in social work, warfare, and development services. And I'll also do this more quickly because of my time. So I'll start by looking at the Ubuntu ethical model by the Council of Social Workers of Zimbabwe. And this has got 3 elements. So the council has got Ubuntu as an ethical principle in its code of ethics, and this must be applauded. So it has got 3 elements, the individual, the community, and the cultural setting. So this is a good example of how Ubuntu can be used at practice or regulation level. There is also the Ubuntu justice framework, how justice is perceived in Africa, which is often different from how justice is perceived in the West or the East. So justice is about deterrence, it's about returning and replacement, it's also about apology, forgiveness, and reconciliation. It's also about warnings and punishments. There's also more about justice. We can also learn from Rango Osowedi and Modi Moroka from their 2007 work about Ubuntu social justice framework. So the Ubuntu social justice framework talks about respect and empowerment, but also equitable distribution of resources. The African Social Work Network, to which I am a member, has also come up with African Research Ethics and Malpractice Statement. And in their statement, they have prioritized Ubuntu. So Ubuntu is the grounding to that ethics statement. So issues about family, issues about community, issues about decolonization, and issues about protection of the most vulnerable populations of society in their ethics and malpractice statement. So that's one example again of how Ubuntu could be applied in social work, warfare, and development research. The African Journal of Social Work also prioritizes literature. That's non-written literature. It also prioritizes personal sources of knowledge, but also written and new sources of knowledge. That's another example of how Ubuntu can be applied in research. As you know, much of Ubuntu values, knowledges, maxims, proverbs are not written. So valuing literature like the African Journal of Social Work is doing is a contribution to Ubuntu. There are also many other frameworks of using Ubuntu, including the ecological spiritual perspective proposed by Van Breda. So it focuses on Ubuntu as a spiritual, it's a spiritual existence, but also as ecological existence. I would also want to talk briefly about Mpedzi Swarango and Manza's 2019 framework. So this is a decolonial framework. So they say Ubuntu is Africa's paramount philosophy, and it has got space in social work. We should be using Ubuntu philosophy in social work at the macro level, micro level, as well as the meso level. Social work literature is also included Ubuntu in varying degrees. And they have talked about social work that is tied to our philosophy. They have talked about professional education tied to our philosophy. And they have also talked about doing away with Western-centric education. More recent work by Mayaka and Truwell, that's a 2021 publication, they have said that, and I quote, Immanuel Kant, who was one of the leading and most influential philosophers of the Enlightenment period, concluded through his scientific and philosophical analysis that African people were incapable of developing philosophy because of their inferiority to white people. Hume and Hegel held similar views. We as social workers are now obligated to challenge this. That's important literature that helps us in our journey to decolonize social work. Let me now briefly turn to the holistic or integrated model of Ubuntu. This was proposed in 2019 by Sharon and myself. So the holistic model has got 6 aspects. It presents 6 aspects of Ubuntu: the individual, the family, the community, the societal, the environmental, and the spiritual. And this is a summary of all the different ideas presented by theorists, presented by philosophers, presented by Pan-Africanists, presented by writers, and presented by our communities. These different levels, they've got different things that they encompass. I've provided that in this slide. There are also the universal aspects that I talked about earlier on. But when we look at these, how much of these do we have in the SDGs? That is the question. How much of these do we have in the SDGs? Let me start by looking at some strength in the SDGs. Collectivity is one of them. Just having the world, the global community focusing on sustainable development, that's collective, that's important. Equality is also one of them. Poverty is the #1 problem. Addressing poverty and hunger, I think that's crucial. Then working on governance and the environment, they are also very crucial goals. But there are some questions with the sustainable development goals. So we can use an Ubuntu framework to understand some of these gaps in the sustainable development goals. They are top-down, no doubt about that. The bottom are not in the collective. So families, communities, and societal approaches that are more preventive, proactive, and relevant and sustainable are not included in the sustainable development goals. So greater community participation is required, especially the rural communities. That's very crucial. Western concepts have found their way in the SDGs, especially in relation to good health and well-being, yet they are not holistic. They neglect the environmental as well as the spiritual issues. Where is family and community strengthening? It's lacking in most of the SDGs. Then in economic empowerment, while it is good, there are also issues with trade equity. What happens in other countries, we all know that other countries in the periphery. So when it comes to commodity prices and the like, they lose out. So what is happening to all that? Then there's also a focus on economic growth. Yes, that's very good, but doesn't it increase extraction and consumption? what then happens to those areas, to those communities where resources are being extracted? And there are also issues to do with education. Yes, we are promoting education, but has it reduced poverty? Has it increased employment? Those coming from Harare, those coming from Nairobi, from Johannesburg, they very well know that people with degrees are roaming the streets without jobs, without income, and those are challenges with the colonial type of education. Of course, there are more other issues: human rights without responsibilities, more developmental approaches are required. There's a lot of brain drain, there's a lot of energy drain, there's a lot of migration that is happening and is disadvantaging countries, especially in Africa. There's also, we have also ignored in the SDGs, we have ignored the country or traditional institutions. NGOs, will they end poverty in Africa? Let's keep talking about that. Then more importantly, the data and the evidence that is used in the SDGs, where is it coming from? Those are very crucial issues. My time is up, so I won't be able to talk about who will make the SDGs more relevant to Africa. What are the barriers? There are several barriers to improving the SDGs. In conclusion, let me return to the small story. So publication A was more relevant. It succeeded because of that. It was more relevant. As authors, we were more relevant when we published in 2013. We used an African philosophy, and that's very crucial. That leads me to make 4 important conclusions about the main, my main presentation, my main story. And the first one being that our philosophies and knowledges should also contribute to development of global policies. We shouldn't just implement, we should also contribute to development of policies such as the SDGs. We should be able to evaluate what comes to us from the world, think, teach, practice, and write in a decolonized way. Number 3, SDGs will succeed in Africa if they become more relevant and grounded in African philosophy. In this case, our overarching philosophy, Ubuntu. And finally, Ubuntu is a powerful tool to make SDGs more relevant. Asante sana, twalumba, murakoze, zikomo kwambili, akani mambo, maitabasa, osoko. Thank you very much.